it's a cult that is extorting its members for insane amounts of money, or a leader who convinces their followers to commit horrifying crimes, and all of the absurd and bizarre behavior of cults in between. This cult with the catchiest name was founded in Uganda by 4 ex-Roman Catholic priests, 2 ex-nuns, and 1 former sex worker, and it was initially said to really emphasize the 10 Commandments. Apparently, these leaders thought that the Roman Catholic Church had really just abandoned the 10 Commandments, and they wanted to bring back some rules. They couldn't just focus on these rules, however, they also had to have some sort of doomsday prophecy as well, like all good cults do. They claimed that the apocalypse would come on December 31st, 1999, and in anticipation of this, a bunch of the members sold all of their possessions, so of course, they were pretty irritated when the world in fact did not end. The leaders scrambled and instead altered their predictions, saying that the Virgin Mary would instead come on March 17th, 2000, and that she would bring them all to heaven. The followers continued to believe this, and on March 16th, they had a huge feast. The following day, on March 17th, police arrived to where the cult resided and found that an explosion and fire killed hundreds of members of the group. At first, they thought this could have been a voluntary event, but soon they saw the signs that pointed to this being a mass killing. The leaders likely took the lives of the followers because they could not pay them back, and they also knew that their quote-unquote prophecies were false. At first, it was thought that the leaders were among those whose bodies were found, but that isn't quite the case. No one is exactly sure if they ended up losing their lives, or if they instead fled the country, which many believe to be the case. At this point, there is still a warrant out for their arrest, so while the authorities have never officially confirmed that they are on the run, it truly is the most likely scenario. In our number 9 spot today, we have Shinrikyo. This cult was founded by a man named Shoko Asahara, and he claimed to be the reincarnation of the Hindu god Shiva. He said that he was destined to lead his followers to salvation once the apocalypse came, but then once he lured in followers, he claimed he could also teach them to levitate and develop telepathic abilities. Apparently, those who were the most skeptical, he allowed them to drink his bathwater. Not really seeing the connection on that one, to be totally honest, but those are just the facts. The cult continued to grow and drew in influential and wealthy people, and this is where things really took a turn for the worst. This group went on to attack Tokyo in 1994, which took the lives of 7 people. Then, in 1995, they released gas into the Tokyo underground, which led to 12 deaths, 50 injured people, and more than 5,000 people with temporary vision problems. In the end, Asahara and 11 of his disciples ended up being arrested and charged for these crimes, and after standing trial, they were all sentenced to death in 2004. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Narco Satanists. Founded by a man named Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo, he was at one point a drug dealer and also the leader of a horrifying cult that was nicknamed the Narco Satanists by the media. Adolfo's followers believed that he had magical abilities, but in the worst way possible. He required his followers to kidnap young men, who Adolfo would practice horrible, sadistic rituals on, and ultimately take their lives in order to replenish this magic that didn't exist. It's an absolutely horrific story, and this carried on for years until the disappearance of Mark Kilroy. Mark was a Texas college student who was in Mexico for some fun over spring break in 1989, but sadly during this trip he was taken by the cult's followers. Mark's friends quickly noticed his disappearance and began searching for him, and this led to a border-crossing manhunt, and authorities quickly revealed what had been going on, but Adolfo had already fled. He and 4 of his followers fled to Mexico City, and this is how he was finally caught. Police were called to the apartment they were staying at as a result of a totally unrelated dispute, but because Adolfo knew that they were looking for him, he just assumed that they were there for him, and he opened fire with a machine gun. Not wanting to go to prison, he then handed the weapon over to one of his followers and asked him to open fire on himself, and by the time the police were able to reach the apartment, he was already dead. In the end, 14 cult members were charged for their crimes relating to everything that went on. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Children of God. Karen Zerbe is the leader of the cult now known as the Family of Love, but is much better known by its former name, the Children of God. In 1969, Karen joined a group called Teens for Christ and ended up becoming the personal secretary to David Berg, who is one of the founders of the group. Eventually, David would divorce his wife in order to marry Karen. Karen had a son named Ricky, and his childhood was made into a book which was used to show other members of the cult how they should raise their children, but the book included some pretty horrific and disturbing content. At first, Karen wasn't around or extremely active in the cult, but she began to insert herself more and began making rules and enforcing discipline. Karen. Once David began to get sick in 1988, Karen took over the leadership position that she had been groomed for. After David passed away, she married another leader from the cult, and all the while, Karen was extremely elusive, so much so that some of the followers didn't even know what she looked like. This cult has actually seen a few celebrities over the years. Jeremy Spencer, who is one of the founding members of Fleetwood Mac, is a member of this cult. Joaquin Phoenix and his siblings were unfortunately subject to this terrible cult when they were growing up, but they all chose to leave later in life and as adults have spoken out about it. Unfortunately, Karen is still active as the cult's leader, even though she most definitely should be in prison, and she still remains in hiding, living off of what money she could collect from followers. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Rajneesh movement. Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh first became known in the 1960s as he traveled through India speaking out against socialism as well as aspects of mainstream religion. While speaking out about these things, he also advocated for a more open attitude when it came to human sexuality, and it's this stance that quickly earned him the nickname the Sex Guru. By the 1980s, he had taken his teachings to the United States, where he opened a facility known as Rajneesh Puram in Wasco County, Oregon, but this quickly upset the locals in the area. Not only were there legal battles surrounding his construction, but there were also crimes being committed by the followers of the Rajneesh movement. And we're talking about really serious crimes. There was a mass food poisoning attack with the Salmonella bacteria, which marked the first known bioterrorism attack in the history of the United States. And if this wasn't bad enough, there was also the attempted assassination of United States Attorney Charles H. Turner. Rajneesh didn't take any responsibility for these crimes and instead blamed his personal secretary and her supporters, but despite this denial, he still found himself deported, after which he returned to India. Here he continued to run the Poon Ashram until his death in 1990. Honestly, the story is absolutely bonkers, the crimes are massive, and the entire thing is just very bizarre. In our number 5 spot today, we have Nexium. This cult was founded by a man named Keith Rainier, and on the surface level, they marketed this group as a multi-level marketing company, but instead it was definitely a cult and a front for disgusting crimes. Keith started off this multi-level marketing career with the company Amway, and by 1990 he had started his own, which ended up getting shut down for being a pyramid scheme. In 1998, Nexium was founded and was originally called a personal development company and was supposed to help with self-improvement. There was a 12-point mission statement which was recited during the cult classes where they purged themselves of all envy-based habits. There were different modules for classes like relationship sourcing, which helped the members explore ways that they could financially benefit if their partner passed away suddenly, or another class where they only learned about psychopaths and their followers. Eventually, the cult leaders started to branch out and form different organizations related to the cult, and long story long, this cult was not for self-improvement, but was involved in some extremely terrible things. In 2018, Keith was arrested and charged, and in June of 2019, he was convicted for conspiracy and conspiracy to commit forced labor, as well as a few other really awful things, and all of these charges were related to Nexium. This story really blew up, especially due to the celebrity involvement of actor Allison Mack, who was also arrested for her involvement in the cult. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Manson family. Started by the horrible Charles Manson, this story starts off when Manson was released from prison in 1967, where he then moved to San Francisco, where he gained a small following that would eventually go on to be the cult known as the Family. The group eventually moved to an abandoned ranch outside of Los Angeles, and it was here that Manson continued to brainwash his followers and manipulate them with his own religious philosophies. He is quoted as saying, quote, "I'm God to my friends, I'm the devil to my enemies. When I look to the future, I'm the prophet. When I must lay down the law for our earth, I'm the son of man." Manson claimed that there would be an upcoming race war in which white people would be killed, which was intended to instill fear in his followers. This was so that he could ignite a race war and send his followers on a killing spree, which ended up being the night of the horrible Tate and LaBianca killings. This led to a reign of terror in the Los Angeles area for several months because people just couldn't understand how or why this happened. In our number 3 spot today, we have Heaven's Gate. Started by Marshall Applewhite and his former partner Bonnie Nettles, the two founded the well-known cult Heaven's Gate. These two believed themselves to be something called walk-ins, which they said are higher beings who took control over the bodies of two middle-aged humans so as to spread their word and teach humanity. People who believed their story and were drawn in by the idea of these higher beings were of course being manipulated and taken advantage of, which is all too common in these cult stories and really is the basis for most of these kinds of stories. They gave up their lives and all worldly possessions in the belief that Earth was to be recycled, and the only way to continue surviving would be to leave immediately. The time to leave Earth came in March of 1997 when Marshall claimed that they had a spacecraft that was traveling to the comet Hale-Bopp. The catch with this spacecraft, however, well, Marshall told them that they needed to stage all taking their own lives in order for the UFO to take them to another level of existence above humans. 39 members of this cult, including Marshall himself, took their lives over the course of the next few days. This was the largest event of this kind since the next point we're going to talk about, which brings me to number 2, the People's Temple Full Gospel Church. Jim Jones is certainly one of the most well-known people on this list for all of the wrong reasons. He is the man who claimed that he was the reincarnation of Jesus, Buddha, and Gandhi, and he founded the cult, which was originally called Wings of Deliverance, but he later changed the name to the People's Temple Full Gospel Church. After an expose in the New West magazine about the things going on in this cult, he ended up moving the group from the United States to Guyana. From here, there were claims of horrible things and human rights violations, which led to an investigation. People found out that some of the supposed members of this cult were actually being held against their will. In the end, with all of this going on, Jim managed to convince his followers to all take their lives in one massive, horrible event, and this day has gone on to become known as the Jonestown Massacre. A total of 918 people died that day, including Jim. In our number 1 spot today, we have Synanon. What originally started out as a drug rehabilitation program founded by Charles Diedrich in 1958, things quickly changed and this began to turn into a sort of group that shared these truth-telling sessions. At first, it was known as The Game before the 1970s when Synanon was officially born. The founder, Charles, as he began to get some kind of power, he grew greedy and hungry for more. This led to him starting to charge insane fees for his members, as well as forcing the members to do extreme physical labor. This is all bad enough, but it gets worse. Anyone who tried to shut this little community down would be met with an attempted hit on their life. Charles developed a list for anyone who challenged Synanon, and this included a lawyer by the name of Paul Morantz, who actually almost died as a result of the hit that Charles had put on him. In 1991, Synanon finally met its end when it was shut down for tax fraud, destruction of evidence, and terrorism, and Charles passed away just 6 years later.
Number 10. Snake Cult of Glycon. Glycon was an ancient snake god who had a large and influential cult in the Roman Empire during the 2nd century. The cult is thought to have originated in Macedonia, where other snake cults, much like Glycon, had existed for centuries. Macedonians believed snakes had magical powers in infertility. Initially, the cult did not worship the spirit of the snake or an abstract idea of a godly snake. Instead, they worshipped an actual physical, tangible snake that resembled a god. The focus of worship in the cult was fertility. Barren women would bring offerings to Glycon in hope of becoming pregnant. The cult's beliefs were spreading all over lower social classes, and over time even high-class citizens and officials were die-hard believers of Glycon's healing and the prophecies Alexander had told. The support and belief of emperors, paired with the healing powers of the serpents throughout history, lured many peoples into the cult, as there are no shortage of converts and believers. Roman coins were even made in honor of Glycon, which was likely happened way after Alexander's lifetime. The Glycon cult is still referred to this day. The statue that was found in Casatana, Romania, is on display at the Casatana History and Archaeology Museum. The statue is even commemorated on a postage stamp from 1974 and on a 10,000 lei banknote from 1994. And to this day, people declare themselves as devotees of Glycon. Number 9. Cult of Dionysus. The cult of Dionysus has sparked dark speculations and controversies for over many years, and it is highly secretive as an organization. Knowing what exactly occurs within the privacy of members is still unknown. That's a large train. Just to list a few of the many theories, here are some of the dark speculations and controversies surrounding the cult of Dionysus, quoting excess and madness. The cult's celebration of intoxication and ecstasy led to accusations of excess and madness. Critics argue that the excessive consumption of wine and the frenzied behavior of the cult participants could lead to a breakdown of societal order and morality. The rejection of traditional roles and the temporary suspension of societal rules during these festivals raised concerns about moral and social distribution, as well as disruption. Bodily liberation, as some Dionysus rituals associated with liberation and promiscuity. The mystery religion aspect of the cult fueled rumors and concerns about what might be happening behind the closed doors. Participation of Dionysus rituals could result in real-life tragedies and violence. Though the speculations likely do hold some truth, being able to definitely answer whether all or any of these theories are true is pretty much impossible. Records of the cult's activity were often exaggerated through misunderstandings and misinterpretations explanations of the cult's practices, but it is thought that many of the rituals have been spotted throughout history, hinting that the cult may not be as inactive as many people think. Number 8. The Pythagoreans. The Pythagoreanism originated in 600 BCE based on the belief and teachings that Pythagoras and his followers held. Pythagoras established the first Pythagorean community in his ancient Greek colony of Croton. The belief spread quickly throughout the land, and the death of Pythagoras created even more popularity as people created their own traditions within the belief system. The beliefs influenced people like Plato, and through him they influenced Western philosophy. Most of the surviving information of Pythagoras came from Aristotle and the philosophers of the Peripatetic school. The beliefs widely spread, and some say that they have survived as a part of Bacchic cults and Orphism. The belief included science and religion. In the early years, the Pythagorean sects were closed societies and where new members were chosen by existing ones. Based on intellect and discipline, soon it became customary for family members to become Pythagorean, as it developed into philosophical traditions that influenced everyday life and sworn members into secrecy. They believed that the soul of the human was buried in the body, and the highest reward a human could attain was the soul joining the gods, meaning they escaped reincarnation. However, after Pythagoras' death, there was tension between the cults, which resulted into an arson attack. The disagreement led to two separate Pythagorean traditions, one called akousmatikoi and the other mathematikoi. One focused more on math and science, while the other was more on unethical practices that changed original beliefs. Number 7. Order of the Nine Angels. The Order of the Nine Angels, ONA, is one of the most mysterious and highly controversial groups in the world and modern Satanism and the occult. The ONA was founded in the UK in the 1960s, promoting an extreme and often dangerous form of Satanism. Its core belief and practices are complex and unconventional, which has led to bouts of intense debates and controversy. From Satanists to non-practicing communities alike, the heart of their philosophy is the concept of the sinister tradition, which is a radical, committed path that encourages members to challenge societal norms and embrace chaos and darkness. They view Satan as a symbol of rebellion against the established order, advocating the personal transformation through dark and sometimes harmful experiences. One of the most notorious aspects of the ONA is its advocacy for culling, a term they use to describe acts of harm and even Homo sapien sacrifice. Some of the ONA's writings are extremely dark and grossly disturbing, further demonstrating their deeply antisocial and extremist perspective. While they remain highly secretive, tight-knit, and a controversial group, their writings and philosophies seem to have managed to spread widely and even found their ways to other areas of the cult, impacting various forms of alternate spirituality. Their belief and practices are widely criticized and condemned for their proud and loud promotion of harm and extremism. Number 6. The Eleusinian Mysteries. They are considered the most famous of the secret ancient rites rituals, and their basis was an old Ugarian cult, and there's enough evidence that they were derived from the religious practices of the Mycenaean period. The mysteries refer to Hades' abductions of Demetri's daughter Persephone and was told in 3 phases: descent, search, and ascent. Originally, the cult of Demetri was private, hidden under telestrion. Some of these practices are seemingly influenced by other religious practices, specifically those from the Mycenaean period. The group would hold a feast at the beginning. Priests would fill 2 special vessels and pour them out, one to the east and one to the west, while the people would look upwards, then downwards while chanting, reign, and conceive. Then a child would be initiated into the group with the divine fire, from the divine fire. Honestly, I tried to decode this, but I didn't really understand it. The climax of the celebration represented the force of the new life. When the mysteries started, immortality was not part of their belief, but they believed that it would grant them a better fate in the underworld. Eventually, the mysteries was spread far and wide, and people flocked all over to participate. And the mysteries were controlled by 2 families, which led to a huge number of initiates. The only requirements was that you never actually directly caused someone's death unless you were able to speak Greek. Number 5. The Temple of the Black Light. The Temple of the Black Light, which is also referred to as MLO, a group associated with the left-hand path spirituality and philosophy, was founded in Sweden in the early 1990s. The MLO has gained popularity in the cult theorists for its unique approach to Satanism and the left-hand path. The central notion of the MLO is the self-created worship that they are called chaotic Gnostic Satanism, which set them apart from many other satanic groups. MLO's beliefs are rooted in a drastic form of nihilism and a deep desire to embrace chaos, darkness, and spiritual rebellion. They believe in an intangible force called chaos, which they see as a destructive, creative, and transformative entity, has a great power and aims to oppose the order and constraints of the universe. MLO's members revered Lucifer as a symbol of enlightenment, liberation, and defiance against traditional religious and societal norms. However, their interpretation of Lucifer is much different from popular depictions of him. To them, Lucifer represents a dark and chaotic force that opposes established religion and the moral codes of society. The Temple of Black Light is considered a highly controversial group even within the broader satanic. They are considered for their extremist and nihilistic views, as their beliefs are not as an accurate representation of traditional satanic traditions and beliefs, which normally encompasses a wide spectrum of practices and beliefs. The cult is actually still active to this day, but very in small numbers. Number 4. Love Has Won. Love Has Won is a new religious movement which was led by Amy Carlson in 2006, referred to as the mother god in the group. Amy was into New Age philosophy in early 2000s, where she was constantly on forums like lightworkers.org, and all of a sudden she got into the paranormal phenomena, which then she left her third husband, her kids, and her job as a manager at McDonald's, and cut off all ties with her family. She then joined a group where they posted YouTube videos in 2009 under the name Galactic Federation of Light, which I don't know if you can still look up on YouTube today. Eventually she rebranded the group to Love Has Won, and the group has been described as a cult by ex-members and media outlets. The group is between 12 to 20 full-time members who lived with her at the time of her death. The theology of Love Has Won has been described as fluid, combining New Age spirituality, conspiracy theories, and elements from mainstream Abrahamic religions. The group has proclaimed that Amy was a divine 19 billion-year-old being who had birthed all creation. She claimed to have been reincarnated 534 times, including Jesus, Joan of Arc, Marilyn Monroe, and Cleopatra. And on April 28, 2021, the mummified corpse of Amy was discovered in her mansion in Crestone, and the state of the decaying suggests that she had been dead for several weeks. She was 45 at the time of her death, and her body was found sleeping in a bag wrapped in Christmas lights, and her face was covered in glitter, and her eyes were missing. And what the authorities stated was a makeshift shrine. 7 members of the group were charged for the abuse of the corpse, as well as due to the presence of 2 kids on the property. Number 3, Angel's Landing. The story of Daniel Perez, a cult leader who convinced parents he had to physically harm their daughters in order to stay alive, shocked the world when it surfaced in 2015. He led a commune named the Angel's Landing and lived off of life insurance money he had earned after ending the lives of one of his followers, Victoria Hughes. After his conviction, one of the victims described the ordeal that she went through of how Sear lured his victims into his obscene lifestyle. Sarah McGrath was 17 years old when her family joined the commune after Perez, whom her mother met while selling him a house, convinced them to move in. He claimed to have magical powers, including the ability to see the future, and led his followers into the 20-acre property, the Angel's Landing. Initially, the communal family was actually pretty chill, however it didn't take long for things to turn dark. Daniel always appeared to seem innocent or someone who cared too much, which is usually how cult leaders work. They seem like they care about you a lot. And her mother was actually a very thoughtful person, so she thought somehow she needed to protect Daniel. And he was very charismatic and really quite the talker. Somehow he appeared very wise, and Perez had eventually convinced his followers in the commune that he was a centuries-old angel who needed to have intimate relationships with young girls to stay alive. Investigators would learn that Hughes was actually collecting millions of dollars in life insurance payouts, and the 6 deaths that ended up resulting as accidents were connected to the cult. Perez was eventually convicted on all counts and sentenced to 2 life terms with consecutive sentences of 80 years. Number 2, Cult of Sacrifice. The cult of sacrifice originated thousands of years ago, but its presence was not as constant. It mainly occurred during the time of great stress when its belief and practices would be most useful. Records of the cult are poorly recalled and only existed in written form, so the origin of the location is actually unknown, but it's speculated that it began in the eastern hemisphere of Rathnur because its most written evidence was found there. The cult was based on an idea of charity and self-sacrifice for the benefit of others, and particularly those who needed the most. The cult took these ideals to an absolute extreme, as they would starve and fast not because it was a religious practice, but because they had given all their food to other people. They were considered minimalists, not because they wanted to, but because they would give all their money and possessions away to those who were perceived to having less. Essentially, they would damage themselves to the point of illness and death, and to the name of the sacrifice and hoping of helping. To join the cult, the one thing necessary was the blessing of an existing cult member. However, to the extreme point of charity and the point of self-deprivation, the cult had only lasted up to 2021, as the last member had passed away on August 8th. Considering the order had to be initiated by a previous member, this once long-lasting cult is now diminished into time. And finally, number 1, Heaven's Gate. Bonnie Nettles and Marshall Applewhite are the co-founders and co-leaders of the Heaven Gate's new religious movement. Although Bonnie Nettles was a registered nurse and was married to a businessman named Joseph Nettles, she lived a relatively normal life. It was unclear how she met Marshall, but after she met a psychic telling her she was going to meet another man, she met him, and they met in the exact description of Marshall. In 1975, Applewhite and Nettles persuaded a group of 20 people from Oregon to abandon their families and possessions and move to eastern Colorado, where they promised that an extraterrestrial spacecraft would take them to a kingdom of heaven. Pretty weird, but I'm pretty sure if you're really desperate, you might actually want to go. Oh, Nettles called herself T, and Applewhite took the name Doe, explained that human bodies were merely containers and they had to be abandoned in order to favor the higher existence. In late March of 1997, as Hale-Bopp reached its closest distance to Earth, Applewhite and 38 of his followers drank a lethal mixture of vodka and then laid down to die. Phenobarbital. Yep. They drank a lethal mixture of phenobarbital and vodka and then laid down to die, hoping to leave their body containers and enter this alien spacecraft and pass through Heaven's Gate into a higher existence. After an anonymous tip, police entered the mansion in the Rancho Santa Fe, an exclusive suburb of San Diego, California, to discover the 39 victims who had all taken their own life.
So, let me break it down for you. This cult was founded by Serge Benhanian, who was a former bankrupt tennis coach from New South Wales, Australia. The first guy that your mom dates after a divorce type of energy. Naturally, like every other random nutcase who starts a cult, Benhanian has no medical qualifications and claims he received an energetic impression, which happened while he was on the toilet. And he brings it up in the cult origin story every time as if he couldn't leave it out he started the cult as a result of butt magic energy or whatever. So, Serge devised universal medicine's healing practices based on the belief that disease is caused by energetic disharmony resulting from karma. And from there to esoteric heals everything was not a stretch for this perv. The esoteric breast massage programs that he peddles are claimed to heal everything from painful periods to breast cancer, which of course is the complete opposite of a fact. In reality, it's an excuse to be felt up, and he charges hundreds of dollars for them, preying on someone's fearful mind and body. Add insult to injury, he's a big old ableist, saying disability is a punishment for past lives' karma, as is being forced upon by someone else. Skin color evolution isn't karma, but it was a conscious choice and we chose to make our DNA do that. AKA this dude is straight bonkers and has never taken a health or science class. A Supreme Court jury found that he leads a socially dangerous group and is a charlatan who makes fraudulent medical claims. There have been endless cases of neglect and defamation battles with him, yet somehow he's still up and running. This phenomena may actually explain all religious origins. It's the John Frum cargo cult. Pacific Islands were heavily trafficked by American troops over World War II. To Pacific Islanders, it's not just the appearance of soldiers and their wild technology, but the seemingly endless supplies that really made them seem mystic. Think like this. These pale men came out of the sky on giant metal birds or through water on heavy metal that somehow floated. They came here, they never farmed or hunted, but yet had food, weapons, and they even had maps of the land. So yeah, it seemed like the soldiers were magically summoned deities from some nether place. So cults appeared, especially after the soldiers departed. The indigenous wanted the soldiers to come back as they often traded and offered them supplies they'd never seen. So, like any cult, they developed rituals. Islanders prayed and built shrines, and soldiers would return sometimes, instilling the belief that those rituals were working. But when the war ended, the soldiers didn't come back at all anymore. Like the gods of myth, they disappeared. Many endured anyway, hoping if they prayed hard enough and they waited long enough, if they do the right things, their God will return. If Christians have been waiting for Jesus for 2,000 years, why is waiting for John Frum any sillier, you know? Perhaps the most notable cult is the John Frum one on the island of Vanuatu. John Frum is depicted as an American World War II serviceman who may or may not be real and brings wealth and prosperity to his followers, but he also seems to live in a volcano, is a spirit, knows everything, and is stronger than Jesus. If you remember the Prince Philip movement from the Bizarre Cults Part 1 video, John Frum is supposedly his dad. A film student was exploited by the cult leader to film their cult's journey, so when he escaped, he showed the world. It's Buddhafield, and they got aired the hell out in a recent documentary called Holy Hell, and I cannot emphasize enough how much you guys should go watch it. When Will Allen, then 22 years old, was forced to leave home in 1985 after his mother learned he was gay, his sister, who was attending a meditation group in West Hollywood, invited him along. He had no idea he would remain on its commune for 22 years, documenting Buddhafield, a Los Angeles cult with hundreds of its members and a narcissistic, sociopathic leader named Michel Rostad, a ballet master with no real talent and a lot of daddy's money. He was a predator through and through, and the carrot dangled to all followers was the knowing, a ritual in which Michel would transfer his energy to the participants so they would truly know God. I don't need to say it, you guys can already guess what that was. The group would work, live, and meditate together, abandoning family and outside commune in hopes of finding greater enlightenment together. Their spiritual guru would in turn psychologically destroy and brainwash his disciples on a daily basis under the guise of new age spirituality that he regurgitated in a twisted way. As the years passed, male members began to realize the hypnotic cleansing sessions run by Michel were actually fronts for their exploitation. With his cult crumbling, Michel fled to Hawaii in 2007 with a handful of his most loyal supporters, and now he teaches yoga on a beach and does the same thing all over again, but hiding from Will and his camera instead of lavishing in front of it. Alright, so let's take a little break from the harmful freaks and instead meet the first Presbyterian Church of Elvis the Divine. That's a mouthful. Thankfully it has a convenient acronym, which is FPCED, and they start celebrating the birth of Elvis on December 8th, which is incidentally the date that John Lennon, one of Elvis's 13 disciples, is killed. I wish they had an organized gospel online so I can learn the names of all the other Elvis disciples. I also learned that 3 bluesmen visited the baby Elvis and offered him gifts as a baby just like Jesus. Furry gave the baby a gallon of cheap wine. John Lee Hooker gave the child pills of many colors. And Robert Johnson offered a can of lard. Furry's a blank, I don't know who that's supposed to be. Sermons like the hot dog, nature's most perfect food, are designed to help believers remain steadfast in their faith. Also, a follower of Elvis would be remiss to leave out the 31 commandments, 31 foods that the followers of Elvis must keep in their homes in case he's ever in the neighborhood. Presbyterians are also required to face Las Vegas once a day and make a pilgrimage to the Graceland at least once in their lives. And true to form, there's an anti-Elvis, which is laughably Lisa Marie, and the Unholy Union. Also, the anti-Elvis demons like Wayne Newton and Madonna, and believers of Elvis must renounce them. And now, back to the sad reality that people suck and harm each other. Next cult is Holy Rollers, which actually isn't their name, but it was the Brides of Christ, but these guys earned that fun nickname for the fact their church sermons were unintelligible moaning, shouting, and tongues while they convulsed and rolled around for hours. It was the first known cult in Oregon, and it started in the 1900s by a dude named Edmund Kreftfield, who fled Germany to avoid the draft, and spun a story that he was a messenger sent straight from God, and that it was his religious duty to convert people to his radical form of Christianity. At the height of their frenzy, he and his followers lit a massive bonfire in the middle of the street to burn all their worldly possessions and a stray dog or two. Edmund was charismatic, flashy, and charming. His following slowly expanded on the promise he spoke directly to God, and his anointed ones would be spared of an apocalypse. And it expanded full of hot rich chicks. Not like Edmund was a looker or anything, but he had game, I guess, and he saw that. So he took opportunity to convince them that they need to be purified by him and his magical junk. And the rumors of that spread fast in the small town. So the husbands, fathers, and brothers of the female followers banded together to tar and feather him, and Edmund somehow survives and comes back to town. It was illegal to commit adultery back then, so the law was on his tarred and feathery ass. They eventually find him hiding naked under one of his followers' houses and send him to jail, and the second he steps foot outside of it in 1906, he gets popped by one of his female followers' brothers, who's acquitted because even the prosecutor was like, yeah, this cult leader had it coming. How about we go even farther back, to an even older cult, the one that caused the Taiping Rebellion, which was a 14-year-long battle known to be the second or third deadliest conflict in history, claiming between 10 and 50 million lives. So, from childhood, Hong Chia-kwan dreamed of being a Mandarin in the imperial court. He fails 4 times at the examinations, and that somehow gave him the revelation that he was the literal son of God and the younger brother to Jesus. Normally they'll do the literal opposite to a person's confidence, but hey, all the power to you. So he starts preaching and stuff, destroying Confucian and Buddhist items, and believing that he and his followers had been chosen to conquer China and establish the heavenly kingdom of harmony and peace. And heavily inspired by a Christian agenda, and declared his own translation and adaptation of the Bible an authentic religion that had existed in ancient China before being replaced by Confucianism. He aimed to convert the Chinese people to the Taiping's version of Christianity and overthrow the ruling dynasty. So obviously the emperor can't be having that, and the rebellion starts because he sends some officers over there to deal with the cult. By 1860, Hong's heavenly kingdom extended across China, and his troops were preparing to march on Shanghai. His impressive army of millions rivaling Kink's own military and taking conscription of nearly every Taiping citizen, and 14 years of bloodshed that permanently weakened all the dynasties. Whatever. Next. Many have experienced the awful neighbor with drum kit. In this case, it was Sachiko Eto, whose story begins with a deadbeat husband who blows out his back and decides to never do anything again, promptly bankrupting and deserting in 1992, leaving Sachiko Eto to care for their daughter alone. Shortly before his spectacular meltdown, Eto and him had been involved in a type of spiritual faith healing that has ties to Shinto, and they got kicked out of that for fraud. But she used what she learned there and those magical powers in fraud in Sukagawa to perform supposed spiritual healings as a proclaimed psychic. And so the sheeple came, and her regular devotees watched her escalate claims all the way to the point that she says she's a god with the power to drive demons away with drums. Her numbers grew, and she got like 20 people living in her house. Her neighbors are complaining about all the cars parked on the street and about the incessant drum kit at all hours of day and night, but they're not complaining to her. Everyone was terrified of her. She used her taiko drum kits to literally drum on a person to chase out devils, and only Eto knew what and who had those devils. Like the woman who once eyed her boyfriend wantingly, she had demons for sure. Yeah. These rituals in reality kept her followers in line, and the extent of this ritual wasn't known until a follower ended up in the hospital for extreme injuries, and police go search the commune. They find 6 bodies, all mummified and wrapped into futons and tatami mats, and all had passed from Ito's drumming rituals. When they were asked why they didn't dispose of the bodies and instead kept them in the cult house, she explained that since the souls weren't dead, we just left them alone. On September 27, 2012, she was 64 65 years old and sentenced to death by rope, and the first woman to be executed in Japan in 15 years. Do you believe Jesus is a lizard and you're too poor to sign up for the Big S cult? Well, rest assured, there are some cheaper alternatives like Superior Universal Alignment. And in all honesty, it doesn't exist anymore, so no joining them. Sorry for getting your hopes up with my Jesus is a reptilian opinion viewers, which was also the opinion of Valentina de Andrade, who thought Jesus was from Mars and started a cult in the 1980s Brazil to share that he would return to rescue believers before the apocalypse. Anyone who followed her word would be saved. Valentina somehow built a following who was forced to leave their families behind and abandon their children for her. A following that even listened to her conviction that males born after 1981 were the embodiment of all evil and had to be exterminated as payment for these beings who would save them. Why 1981? I don't know. Why the male sex? I don't know. She's crazy, not me. Meanwhile, the Amazonian town Ultramira is having a sudden increase in missing men and boys. By 1994, the reports rose to 19 in total, and make matters worse, 5 bodies of boys had been found in terrible conditions, but none of them were the ones who had been reported missing. All police efforts were futile until one day, someone shows up to the police having escaped captors. Stories of black market organs, strange mutilations, and demonic rituals all show up, and when the culprits are identified, they're all respected members of society. What's new? Since it happened on a remote town, it took 11 years to solve this case. The authorities captured 4 of the identified captors, but Valentina managed to flee the country. After some years, she's finally arrested, and nobody really knows what happens to her after that. Not many people know that quite a few of our modern religions actually did start as cults, and had to exist as a long time before being included in census or religious categories. Not the case for Pastafarianism. You guys probably didn't think I would do it, and I'm doing it. The church was founded in 2005 when 24-year-old Bobby Henderson sent a letter to the Kansas State Board of Education because they were teaching the theory that the universe was created by an intelligent entity in science class, which is the exact opposite of science, which Bobby explained, stating that because intelligent design uses ambiguous references to an official creator, the universe could very possibly be created by a flying spaghetti and meatballs monster, so they should teach that too. When he received no response from the Board of Education, he posted his letter on his website and other online forums explaining this perspective and how science and religion need to be kept separate, and an internet sensation and religious cult was born. So, to answer some questions you may have, heaven and hell still do exist. In Pastafarian heaven, there is a beer volcano and an exotic dancer factory. Pastafarian hell, the beer is stale, and the exotic dancers have diseases. There are patron saints, they're all pirates. Followers will dress like pirates. Pirates are religiously revered and believed to be peace-loving explorers and spreaders of goodwill. Also, global warming is the result of a decreasing number of pirates. Don't forget your Bible, it's called the Loose Canon, a compilation of texts similar in style to the traditional Bible, such as Suggestions 1:1. I am the flying spaghetti monster, thou shalt have no other monster before me. Afterwards is okay, just use protection. The only monster who deserves capitalization is me. Other monsters are false monsters, undeserving of a capitalization. Baba Henderson estimates his religion has actually about 80,000 followers. Pastafarianism is officially recognized as the religion in 3 countries, Poland, Netherlands, and New Zealand. So that's a hard one to follow up, but this story is one of the craziest things you'll ever hear, and it stars Magdalena Solis. And it starts with conmen Hernandez brothers arriving in sleepy Yerba Buena village. No school, no police, no church. A group of 20 families, the perfect victims. So, they claim to be prophets of ancient Incan gods that could deliver the people riches, and used sleight of hand tricks and strange fake cave rituals and hemp-laced incense to manipulate and convince these villagers, who then acted as their servants. However, as the months go by and there's no gold, some villagers begin questioning the Hernandez brothers' supposed power. So in order to keep the scam going, the brothers told the villagers that they would leave, go talk to their gods, and come right back with a goddess. In a nearby town, they find teen working girl and charlatan psychic Magdalena Solis, who eagerly agrees to join the scam. They make a grand entrance of her, nighttime, cloud of smoke, dressed in gold. They really sold it to the villagers, who now would do anything they wanted. And man, these guys wanted some perverse stuff. Substance being the main. The 3 really got hard into it, and under the influence, Solis now believed she really was a goddess, specifically the reincarnation of the Aztec mother goddess. She demanded followers to do animal sacrifice, then drink the blood, then engage in group sessions, use substances, and then human sacrifice, ancient Aztec style, cutting the hearts out of her victims while they're alive kinda style. And one night a young boy stumbles across this and goes back home and forces a police officer from his town to go see it with him. Days go by, they don't return. Remembering the horror the boy described, other police officers bring an army contingent with them and go to the cave on May 31st, 1963, just in case. It essentially starts as a substance bust. Solis and the Hernandez brothers found cooked off their faces with a bunch of stuff they shouldn't have. This Hernandez, Santos, refused to be taken alive. Villagers panic, engage in firearms with police, results in more loss of life. 8 sacrifice victims are found altogether, the boy and the officer included. 8 more bodies are never found. The Solea says, along with Santos Hernandez and the other villagers arrested in a raid, stood trial. None of the villagers would testify against her, so Magdalena was only convicted for the police officer and the young boy, a 50-year sentence. Cut cult is number 10, and they quite literally cut themselves out of a different cult, Summit Lighthouse, their origin. In 1975, founder Elizabeth Blair Prophet pitched herself and her husband as messengers of ascended masters who were believed to be spiritually awakened ancient beings. Because of branching off of one cult wasn't apparently enough, this couple tossed in some other cult elements from Christian Science, the I Am movement, and general doomsday cults. Mix that together and shake, and you've got a married couple siphoning money out of growing congregation members to buy land in Montana, which was to be their apocalyptic safe haven. Members worked themselves to the bone and drove themselves into debt, clamoring to reserve a spot in the safe haven and build their fallout shelters. This cult held their flock from leaving by stranding them in this haven, now bankrupt and with nowhere else to go. They used tactics like sleep deprivation and manipulation against any who tried to depart. The prophet retired, not died, just retired one day in 1999 and passed in 2009. Since, the church is still run, but with endless legal issues and succession debates. Builders of Adytum is number 9, and it's a super chill group if you can get behind mystic rituals, magic, prophecies, and clairvoyancy. Paul Foster Case, a Catholic Freemason, founded this group in 1922. He combed the teachings of Astoric with tarot cards, Masonic imagery, and the Kabbalah. Quite a power combo. Anyways, Case saw himself as not divinity, but a man sent to, quote, accept the enormous responsibility of founding an order dedicated to the welfare of all of mankind. And that's kind of what he's done. This group has had a following of 5,000 members worldwide, excluding those followers who don't pay the membership dues. Like Jesus, who many believed was trained in the Kabbalah, members of BOTA aspire to build the inner temple, to construct the Holy of Holies within. People of all faiths are welcome to study the teachings of this order. There has been some rumors that BOTA won't allow any LGBTA members to advance in their spiritual journey past a certain level, as they are considered unbalanced, but with exception to that, this cult is pretty tame. No money laundering, no frauds, no harming of its followers. It's devoted to the study of mystic rituals, magic, religion, tarot, and ancient spirituality. It wants to sell you a lot of books and lessons, but that's about as dark as it gets. They even have known physicists, authors, and astrologers as part of their group. After the passing of Paul Foster Case, Ann Davis took over the leadership, but she's not as favored as the past Paul. Overall, they're said to have a slow and comfortable process and explanation of their information and practices. You can check out their website as well. Cults go Hollywood with number 8 in the countdown, the Aetherius Society. Known for its residency on Hollywood Boulevard in Los Angeles, this bizarre group starts in the 1950s with leader Dr. George King, who one day says to have received a cosmic transmission from the interplanetary parliament that explained that Aetherius, an alien from Venus, was our next messiah. King also believed himself to have spoken with many entities he saw as godlike cosmic beings or masters. Jesus is also one of those, and also from Venus, BTW, and the Lord Buddha is another. Naturally, like many cults, Aetherius has predicted the apocalypse. However, the Aetherians of the past and present aren't doommongers like many other apocalyptic cults. While they know it's coming, they weren't told when. The Aetherians are also quite existential, practicing self-awareness and meditation, and are acutely aware of global climate issues and politics that affect the currents of our society and our planet. At the center of the Aetherius Society is a belief that around the world there are 19 holy mountains, each individually imbued with cosmic significance by George King. Mount Baldy in California is the object of their frequent pilgrimages. With energy they create from their prayers, stored in a crystalline battery and transmitted via radio signal, they endeavor to maintain global peace. You can check out this tranquil but bizarre cult on their website or their Facebook page. Classic rom-com or just comedic? Number 7 is Full Circle Cult. Why the glib comment? Well, this cult is founded and run by Andrew Keegan, best known for his role as Joey in 10 Things I Hate About You. So how did he go from acting to culting? In 2014, Keegan started his new spiritual movement aimed at spiritual millennials in hip and upbeat Venice, California. And Keegan's cult advertised itself as advanced spiritualism, or the highest spiritualism founded on universal knowledge. They also enjoy ayahuasca. This cult offers workshops and community meet and greets that allow for public interaction. Every week, a diverse group of congregants will take part in yoga, cultural gatherings, and ceremonies inside the 110-year-old temple at 305 Rose Avenue, one of the oldest buildings in Venice, California. California. It's also been used as a temple for multiple religions before this cult, which was probably part of the renter's appeal for Keegan. A year into running, Keegan faced fines for the distribution and sales of alcohol without a license when undercover ABC agents confiscated several containers of kombucha that were apparently brewed a little too strongly. This group has also been known to enjoy a little bit of the Mary Jane on the side too. While we don't know if there's any sinister intent in this group, we do know that it has struggled. Due to big companies like Google and Snapchat moving into the area, rent got too high for the group by 2017, and they're forced to leave their temple. Keegan promises though that the cult isn't over, and rather a new level is coming, including sound healing, education, medical type practices, food, and health. This name changer of a cult is number 6, it's the Moonies. Founded by Sungyoung Moon in 1940s Korea, this cult is now called the Unification Church and has had many other names. While born in North Korea, he was eventually imprisoned there under a false accusation from the government, and when released, Moon fled to South Korea. Before this had occurred, Moon had already been preaching and had his first vision of Jesus appearing to him with the task to establish God's kingdom on earth. With his newfound prison freedom, Moon started his church in South Korea, a mix of Confucian and Christian beliefs mixed with divine prophecies. With that, Moon created the new Bible. Unlike many other cults, this one got big, sitting at around 10,000 members in its prime. When Moon held the infamous mass weddings, they required stadiums for the thousands of attendees. A rejecter of romantic love, weddings were the holy marriage blessing ceremony, a core ritual at which couples are removed from the lineage of sinful humanity and engrafted into God's sinless lineage. In the 70s, the Moonies made their way to the US, where they reportedly separated college students from their families through brainwashing. They've also been accused of deceptive recruiting methods, practices, and manipulative financial frauds. This cult has faced lawsuits, government scrutiny, and even had 400 of its members abducted in the 70s and 80s for cult deprogramming. Moon died in 2012, and the religion broke off into 3 factions, each following a family member. Some follow his widow, who many consider to be a messiah and is now the founder of the Women's Federation for World Peace International. Others followed his eldest son to his Family Peace Association, and others followed his youngest son to the Sanctuary Church. I guess cult leader can be genetic. Here we go again with the Brethren at number 5. If you watch part 1 of our bizarre cults, you may think I'm revisiting the same cult. Don't worry, I'm not lazy, it's just that cult leaders aren't creative with their names. This Brethren cult was founded by the late Jim Roberts, a preacher's son. He had practiced sermon by 15 and later served in the Marines. This combination of strict religion and disciplinary Marine Corps made for a hardened man with some unique ideology. In Chicago, his religious philosophy paired with leadership skills, charisma, and an air of authority allowed him to gain a small group of congregants by visiting college campuses and public areas. He had about 100 followers under a tight-knit polled at the time he ordered everybody to drop out of society nomad style in 1971. He had explained the decision in order to secure a place in heaven, people had to begin purifying themselves, according to the passages of the Bible. Brethren must forsake their families and friends and all material goods. You sew your own clothing and you eat from the dumpster. And of course, all money goes to the leader. Laughing and dancing are a huge no-no, as are children playing and anyone accessing medicine or medical care. Naturally, the cult has been accused of negligence for allowing its members to suffer or even die from perfectly curable illnesses. The only acceptable transport to them is bikes, buses, and hitchhiking to get around. Men wear their hair short and have long beards, and women wear long tunic dresses. Women, of course, are subservient to men, and everyone was subservient to Roberts while he was still alive. In 2015 that changed, as Robert passed from cancer left undiagnosed from his hatred of medicine. But most converts didn't change anything and remained nomadic. Many are still out there. Thanks to the coordinated efforts by parents of cult followers who created the Roberts Group parent network, several members have managed to be deprogrammed and returned home. Eckankar, a fun word that I'm probably pronouncing wrong, is number 4. Eckankar and all its frivolousness was made possible by founder Paul Twitchell in 1965. It's a New Age religion group, and like many other New Age religion groups, it was really just code for a jumble of mysticism and Eastern philosophy mixed with yoga, meditation, tarot cards, and made-up iconography. Believing all members have ancient roots going back 10,000 years, they were to be given a new name and learn the secretive language of the Eckanars. All of it done in the name of the group's meditation ritual, where one chants, "Ha!" and separates their soul from their body. Dreams are regarded as important teaching tools, and members often keep journals to facilitate studies. Eckankar teaches that spiritual liberation in one's lifetime is available to all, that it is possible to achieve self-realization. This group started in Minnesota, Canada, and it's now spread throughout the country, and it's made its way to others such as Europe and Asia, but it's primarily practiced here in North America. Since Twitchell's passing, this group has had several successors and remains popular today. Despite being a registered non-profit, the group sells its founders materials for a hefty profit, and there are allegations that virtual virtually all of the books are plagiarized. Come on, you know by now cults love fraud. Happy Science could have you looking sad in number 3. Far-right nationalism meets New Age spiritualism in the Japanese Happy Science cult. Founded by Ryuhei Okawa in 1986, he had been a cult member himself in the Godlight Association. Okawa decides to dip and start his own cult of personality when he realized that being a cult leader could prove to be a lot more profitable than being an anonymous corporate employee and a cult follower. Okawa pitches in his sermons that he is a human incarnation of a supreme being called Eckankar, who combines Christ and Buddha and Muhammad and every other prophetic deity to create a 9-dimensional heaven with him at the head, and of course can communicate with the celestial. He predicts that some of these celestials might visit us one day bearing the apocalypse. He's also convinced that there's a space alliance that forbids any kind of interstellar attacks or war between planets. Apparently some representatives could already be here, living among us, so remember that the next time you start trash talking the aliens. Here's where the strangeness picks up a notch. He also created a massively complex mythology of New Age nonsense while simultaneously founding an extremist political wing called the Happiness Realization Party. His party advocates the vicious Japanese nationalism devoted to denying historical cruelties, advocating for conflict with China and North Korea, and to rebuild Japan's infrastructure. The group claims to have 12 million members around the world, has multimedia arm, and enjoys a tax-exempt status in the USA as a church. Let's get biblical. Number 2, the 12 tribes. So sorry for how cringy that was. The 12 tribes take holistic and traditional practices to exploit under the guise of New Age hippiedom. The Christian fundamentalist cult was born in 1970s, led by Albert Eugene Spriggs and his wife Marcia in Tennessee. They advertise their nature communes and 70s-themed diners and cafes, whilst behind closed doors, their practices are far less than free love. There is a belief that slavery was a marvelous opportunity for black people, and the support of conversion camps for the LGBTA who they think the world should be rid of. The 12 Tribes tries to keep its extremist teachings from outsiders and even some of their inside members, but former members and experts on fringe religious movements who have helped followers escape paint a pretty horrific picture of life in the group. Black and LGBTA members especially suffer, as once indoctrination is over, members change tune and become aggressive towards them. Their followers sacrifice their earthly possessions to live in any of the many communes and follow the teachings of the modern-day apostle with no deviation, lest they risk being ostracized by the cult and damned to an apocalyptic lake of fire. Members must work for free in the commune stores and cafes. Their access to internet, secular books, movies, everything, worldly influences of any kind are extremely restricted. In its 50 years running, 12 Tribes distinguish itself from other tribes with legal businesses, operations such as food services, construction, soap making, woodworking, farming, solar energy, and even an Alaskan fishing operation. By members living communally, sharing money and resources, and all businesses staffed by followers who work without pay, ex-members told the Denver Post this is how the cult perfectly constructed to leave you with nothing should you choose to leave. This next cult is one of unbelievable brutality. It's the Narco Satanist at number 1. Okay, so that's a word and a half, but it essentially means the satanic doobie dealers led by Adolfo de Jesus Costanzo. Its members were traffickers and deeply disturbed people. Having studied Palo Mayombe from a young age, Adolfo took fascination with the concept of remains having religious purposes and affiliations. This fascination grew, and while Palo isn't inherently evil and can be used for great good, Adolfo was also exposed to his mother's criminal behavior and criminal consorts as a child, as well as rampant poverty, which were huge influences on his future life of crime. I'm going to keep this vague because the victims deserve to be acknowledged more than the crime. After moving back to Mexico as a teen, Adolfo made a group of friends who indulged his radical and bizarre opinions about the benefits of animal and even human sacrifice in the name of deities. They began to run a profitable business casting spells to bring good luck using Adolfo's Palo background and some made-up mojo, involving expensive ritual sacrifices of chickens, goats, snakes, zebras, and lion cubs. Many gangs and high-ranking politicians visited the group on their ranch property for these spells. It's here the group indulged in the use of heavy substances, and the religious factor was metamorphosized into dark magic intensely. Believing the magic he took from Palo Mayombe may be the success of their cartel and the spell business, Adolfo realized that if the dead bones in his Nganga altar worked this well, how well would live ones? Tragically, this realization resulted in the sacrifice of over 20 people, which most had incredibly inhumane ends. The cycle breaks, however, with Mark Kilroy, an American who had been abducted and sadly perished by the group's hand. American authorities put pressure on Mexico and forced their police to find out that a cult leader had been under their noses all along. Adolfo refused to go to prison and went down in a literal blaze of glory, never facing punishments for his crime. 14 other members were arrested and charged, and American authorities still wait for the release of 3 of these members from life sentences in Mexico for their turn to be prosecuted in the USA.